Hi, welcome. We're going to get started here. Welcome to Fighting the Good Fight, Python 3 in your organization. And this is going to be a talk from Jason Fried, who heads up the Python Foundation team at Facebook. And especially given the eventual end of term for Python 2 upcoming, it's probably a pretty prescient discussion topic. So with that, welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Jason Fried, and I'm a production engineer at Facebook, like you said. I started working at Facebook on Halloween of 2013, and quickly after I started, I had to teach myself Python because it was more socially acceptable than the Perl that I knew, and since I had work to do, and it was easier to get code reviewed if it was written in Python, and Python was the only thing my first team really knew, so if I sent them other things, they just didn't know how to review it. So later, at some point, I somehow became the driving force for Python 3 adoption at Facebook. And I won't lie and say that I had a plan all along or I did it all alone, but I was the primary driver. And in the beginning, all I ever wanted and all I ever needed is nice things. So I kind of got started by helping out in the internal FE Python group. And it was at first, I was like usually the first guy to answer questions for people asking coding questions. And I kind of became famous, or maybe infamous, among the Python issues at Facebook. When I saw issues or places where we were doing the wrong thing, I didn't ask permission, I just fixed it. And you see, I kind of built up this over time, people started to accept my expertise. And this helped build credibility internally for what was to come. So you see, for code at Facebook, it's not a top-down hierarchy of like control. It's more of a meritocracy of engineers, of their ideas. So you have to convince your fellow engineers that your merits, the merits of your ideas, and they have value. Because the power that they have, everybody at Facebook as an engineer has just as much power to undo a change as you did to make that change. This really worked well for me because I'm a nobody, and I could step in and actually start making differences. So changing something big at Facebook scale is going to take some time and a lot of diplomacy checks. So let me tell you the story about how I and a couple of engineers used our free time with no authority whatsoever, made Python 3 the dominant Python version at Facebook. So in 2013, at the same time as we were getting access to Python 2.7, we were getting access to Python 3.3. It was as part of a task to add Python 3 support to the build system. But that task had been blocked since 2012, and what it was blocked on was for there to be Python 3 support in the internal libraries, which didn't, because that was blocked on having Python 3 support in the build system. So a lot of a catch-22 there and where we were going. So sure, we had Python 3.3. It was in our environment, it was there, but it was like you installing it on your laptop and saying, okay, upgrade to Python 3. But sir, we had access to it, but it was really theoretical. Nothing internally had support for Python 3. It also didn't help that at the time, the opinion of Python 3 at Facebook by the engineers was very negative. Most people in the company were either thinking, hey, we'll just stay on Python 2.7 forever. And some even talked about jumping ship completely to a different language. And even I was not a fan of Python 3. I said this once in a discussion group, and in my defense, it did look pretty bleak in 2013 that we would ever be able to run Python 3 in production. Well, at the time, only one person called me out on that statement and challenged me to do something about it. I didn't at first think, oh, maybe I should do something about it. I was like, blow them off. But I did stick in my head. See, I admit it was pretty dark back then. But some things were changing. There was a light at the end of the tunnel, and it wasn't an oncoming train. See, in early 2013, a linter was put in place that required the 4 infamous imports. Some people hate them, some people love them. But these were added in an attempt to extend the life of our Python 2 code so that we could still keep writing Python 2 code and maybe it would still be compatible in the future. But because we did this, people use these everywhere at Facebook. And they were just required the linter, the early linter you couldn't opt out of, you just did it to make the linter happy. And we had to tackle all of our Unicode issues very early, And sure, we introduced a lot of other issues, like we wrote functions that accepted bytes or Unicode, or we used base string for instance checking. But for the most part, these imports would make it easier in the future to convert those modules to Python 3. This leads us to Thrift. Apache Thrift is a remote procedure call and serialization framework. And it's how, at Facebook, services talk to each other. And it is one thing that's ubiquitous at Facebook. It's used everywhere. And without support of Thrift, you could not go to Python 3. And it is one of those core blockers. And it would stand in our way. So we had to tackle that early. See, in October 23rd, the FB Thrift team put up a poll for feature requests. And they're like, we're going to change Thrift, what should we do? And they put Python 3 as one of the arguments on the poll. And strange enough, it was popular in a company that hated Python 3, weird enough. I voted for it because I thought the Thrift Python 2 ecosystem really needed a good refactor. It looked like it had come through Java. So I wasn't on board with the Python 3 bandwagon, but I voted for it. But this was until October 16th of 2013, when Guido gave a talk at Yelp in San Francisco about Tulip, which would later become async.io that you all know today. I was already a fan of async programming in Python 2, but back then it was a very diverse and split up thing. You couldn't just give you a library and people wouldn't run it like, oh, I'm running Tornado, you're doing Twisted, I'm sorry, we can't talk. But async.io in my head opened up this magical future where different async frameworks could have interoperability and we could be free again. So before the talk was even over, I'm furiously typing on my phone to the Thrift team at Facebook saying, hey, we need to support Tulip now. Instead of having, because they were like, oh, we can't do Python 3 support because we have to wait till Twisted gets Python 3 support and G-Event gets Python 3 support. I was like, no, let's support Tulip now and not bother with Twisted or Python 3 because in the future, it won't matter. We'll have interoperability. So that said, the Thrift team would only have to support one async framework, and it would relieve some stress from their side. After Guido gave the talk, I was so pumped about the future of Python 3, and I was sold on Python 3 at that point. And on October 19th, 3 days later, the Thrift team put up a project roadmap, and it included Python support with Tulip. So back to the timeline of change. In 2013, it was all still pretty hopeless. The idea that we would ship Python 3 services to production was laughable. If I wanted Tulip to be a thing at Facebook, and by extension Python 3, I would have to make sure that Python 3 was at least possible to use. And Python users would hopefully just manifest if there was infrastructure to support them. So I aided the FB Thrift team with code reviews and porting help, and by February 3rd of 2014, they shipped Python 3 support in Thrift. And then shortly after, they actually shipped Tulip support. Awesome. Well, not so fast. For 6 months, this support laid unused in our infrastructure. Nobody showed up. We built the infrastructure, and it was just sitting there. It was like these cities in China that they built during expansive urbanization and economic growth, but they were left abandoned because they were waiting for all the rural inhabitants to move in. So the users did not show up. They didn't have plans to show up. They didn't even know this thing existed. They didn't care. This was all about to change. In August of 2014, I started a project to rewrite the infrastructure service that I had become the misfortunate owner of. See, the service was to distribute Facebook.com, and it was old, and it was tired, and it was complicated and really hard to maintain, and so I decided I was going to rewrite it. The project was basically we're going to completely rewrite it from the ground up. We're using a modern infrastructure, modern best practices in coding, and I wanted the service to last for many years to come, free from the crushing technical debt of its predecessor. And I was going to write it all in Python 2 and G-Event. Well, I kind of sat there and was like, what am I doing? It's like, it dawned on me that if I wrote this service in Python 2, it would be obsolete the moment I started writing it. I would be baking into it technical debt that somebody at some future time would have to convert it to Python 3. And that bothered me because in my head, the Python 3 future wasn't very far away. I was pumped. I was excited. I believed it was there close. Through this, I discovered change won't happen by itself. Somebody has to be the first one to make the change. And for Facebook and Python 3, that person was going to be me. And for Python 3 in your organization, I think that person should be you. In the words misattributed to Gandhi the most, be the change you want to see. If I wanted Python 3 to be a thing at Facebook, I would have to be that change. So I started my project in Python 3. And of course, everything was broken. No wonder nobody was using Python 3 yet at Facebook. So when I wrote my build config for like an entry point the build system would give me, it wouldn't even build. The build system treated Python 3 like it was just a brand new version of Python 2.7. The dependency trees refused to resolve. All of our third-party wheel dependencies were only for Python 2, or only built against Python 2. And the Thrift support that we'd landed those 6 months earlier was completely broken by Python 2 only regressions that had happened in that time span. And we had a lot of these swig and boost wrappers around C++ that were broken, and some of them are still broken, around handling of binary data for Python 3. When I resolved enough of these issues to finally get my system to build so I could run it, it immediately threw an exception at runtime. And it wasn't even in my code. It was deep down in the machinery that makes our entry points work at Facebook. So this is why we really can't have nice things. Maybe the light at the end of the tunnel was a train after all. But, so while I was writing my project, I was having to fix the world, at least what I needed for Python 3. I had to rebuild hundreds of third-party wheels to say that they were both 2 and 3 in our build system. And every time I needed an internal library, I had to do the work myself to turn it into 2.3 polyglot. But there was a problem. Every day, somebody would commit a change that would break me. They would commit a Python 2 only regression into one of my dependencies. Or they would upgrade one of the versions of a third-party wheel, and they would only release a Python 2 version, because they don't know about Python 3. So I became really tired of fighting regressions. And I found that most of these regressions were, while valid Python 2 code, were simple errors in Python 3, something that we could catch with a linter, like name errors or syntax errors that you could just fix if you knew they were there. So I had to force a little bit of compliance. Now, I said before, Facebook is not the organization where you can force things. You don't have that kind of power. People can just unforce them. But if you do it the right way, you can, from the bottom up, change the whole world. Well, sometimes we engineers, we can force that compliance if you do it just right. So I learned quickly, if you acted with authority, people would sometimes assume that you had that authority. Well, I think I used up a good portion of my social capital in 2014 because in late August, I instituted an automatic PyFlakes linter. I'm not sure why I picked PyFlakes over Flake 8, I think because we already had a PEP8 linter. But it was a good choice at the time because it didn't have a lot of false positives. And I could justify its existence because we already had a PEP8 linter, and we already had the four import linters, or future imports linter. So I could say, this is for code quality, guys. We're doing this for code quality. People are like, oh yeah, okay, that makes good sense. Well, secretly, I was doing it so they would stop breaking Python 3. So what I did is I made sure that PyFlakes would run every time you put code up for review, and it would run first in Python 2, and then it would run in Python 3 and show you the errors for both. So this would basically, in effect, cause people at Facebook to write Python 3 code. Well, at least sort of. This allowed me to distribute the job of preventing regressions so that I could actually work on my project. So linting is not a perfect science. You really need unit tests. So for most of the libraries internally that I was going and I was converting for polyglot, I would come behind them and I would say, oh, your config for unit tests also run under Python 3. They didn't know, but I would just do it so that in the future, their maintainers would see that when they would try to commit new code, that they would break these unit tests they didn't previously see. And it turned out that they would fix them instead of committing it. And this was a much easier way than trying to issue a task to say, hey, you had a regression, fix it after the fact. And it wasn't always easy for people to be compliant. I had to be very responsive in the early days. I spent a ton of time going into code reviews and basically explain to people, no, the linter's not wrong. This is actually a problem in Python 3 and why they should care. And because if people thought converting to Python 3 was hard, if it seemed hard, they would not bother. They would just regress to the let's stay in Python 3 forever, or Python 2 forever mindset. So I ended up making it really easy for people just to do the right thing. I hacked the internal build system so that it would include the third-party modules 6 and future in every single entry point, so that they appeared to be like in the standard lib. So people could just write Py 2/3 compliant code without having to go out of their way and change their build configs and stuff like that. So people just seemed to do it. It was easier just to shut the linter up, and inversely me too, than complain about it. So people did. I also fixed the defaults for third-party wheel builds, so that the build config template didn't just say Python 2, it would say Python 2 and 3. This seems like a simple thing, but we never thought of it before. And what that did is instead of them just, every time they would do a new version, it would blow away my Python 3 version, it would build a brand new 2 and 3. This removed the time-consuming thing of me having to come back behind people and re-enable Python 3 support. With all these things in place, we really stopped the bleeding of Python 3 support, but we weren't really gaining any ground. That year, I joined the teaching rotation for a new hire class called Python at Facebook. It informed new engineers about the reality of programming Python at Facebook, and maybe hopefully prevent them from having any gotchas about that'll get in their way of doing their work. The class, because of the linters I'd put in place, had already been instructing new hires that they're supposed to write 2.3 compatible code. Because, and even in the slide says, one day in the future, however distant it may be, we may switch to Python 3, so let's do the work now. Well, writing 2.3 code and only ever testing it in Python 2 was not enough to advance Python at Facebook. We wanted to get to a future where people wrote Python 3 for new code and only wrote 2.3 code for legacy projects. So in 2015, I took matters into my own hands, yet again. I made a change to the class slides and informed the other teachers. The class now said, for all new code at Facebook, must be written in Python 3, if it's Python code. And you should never write Python 2 code, unless it's for a legacy project. And even then, it still must be 2/3 compatible code. Because either the project will die, and we lose the Python 2 code, that's great, or we're gonna have to convert it to Python 3 at some point. So I taught new hires to just expect everything should work. And if not, file a task, actually complain about it, don't just accept that it doesn't work, complain about it, or try to fix it themselves. And strangely enough, that's what happened. People did. So this is another saying we used to throw around called educate for the future you want, not the present you have. There's a kind of a debate internally where this came from. We just started using it. I think I said it, Wukash thinks he said it. But I started using this statement to justify the new hire class, using it as basically, I don't know, you could call it propaganda, but using it as a mechanism to drive change. Hell, most of the core dependencies had already been converted in 2014 for my project, so everything should have just worked. All we needed was the people to show up, to write new code, to keep things from regressing and to move forward. So in January 2015, I finally shipped my project. It took me almost a year because I had to fix everything. And I spent a lot of the rest of the year just selling people on that project. They're like, this is the better version. You should use this instead of the old system. But by this time, a lot of the allies to the Python 3 conversion had made themselves known. People like Wukash Langa, a core Python developer, he joined the company in 2013, and he was also doing stuff. So together with a few others, we really pushed the bar in 2015 just by writing modern code so that we could all use these nice new things that were showing up. But stranger things were going to happen. Wukash had somehow convinced Instagram to move to Python 3. So in 2016, he and I formed this brand new team dedicated to shepherding Python at Facebook that we called the Ministry of the Silly Walks. Now that it was only the two of us, but because we were the Python team, that authority perceived thing, that actually started working more often. People assumed that these guys are in charge of Python, so we should listen to them. So it gave a lot of validity to our efforts. And our primary mission was supporting Instagram in their move to Python 3. Well, I saw a slow but steady growth in Python 3 usage through 2016. Internal discussions were commonly about Python 3. And every day we would hear new things about projects that were brand new that were choosing Python 3 for their code. And obviously the tide of public opinion at Facebook had turned. Python 3 use was growing even though it was not the default version in the internal build system for entry points. You had to go out of your way to say, I want Python 3 version. Normally it would just give you 2. And we even used to say, Python 2 will probably always be the default version of Python at Facebook. Just remember, I always say these always be, and I'm usually wrong. But not anymore. Okay. There we go. On May 2nd of 2016, I made this internal post with signaling my intentions of changing the default version of the build system to be Python 3. And, you know, basically I had kind of arguments. One of the main arguments was that the legacy version of Python, if you're using it for a new project, it wastes the company money. Since any project starting in Python 2 will at some point have to be upgraded to Python 3. So you're costing the company twice as much money to write the same code. And the thing is, like, so why not save the technical debt and use modern Python to begin with? The post actually received unanimous support. By May 5th, I had already modded all the existing Python 2 build configs and said, okay, I really want a legacy version of Python, and shipped it out. With the millions of lines of Python code and the thousands of entry points, I didn't break anything. Nobody seemed to notice. It just seemed like the next logical thing. Also in 2016, we formed what we lovingly call the Shadowy Council for Python Domination. This internal messenger group was made up of all the allies throughout this process that had made themselves apparent. They were active in Python 3. We used this group to keep abreast of any compatibility issues that may arise, discussing about the future of the language at Facebook, and to keep abreast of any dissenters to our evil plan. So you see, you can't do something like this alone. You're going to need help. And you're going to need allies. And when those allies come, you should recruit those allies. Now, there were about 10 people in total that really pushed Python 3 at Facebook, for at least the Facebook side. But there was only ever 3 people that worked collaboratively at a time, because people came and went. It was never an official project. We just had to do it in our free time. So, towards the end of 2016, we had a post from a project team that had converted to Python 3, and they really just ran 2 to 3 on their code base. They didn't do anything. They just ran 2 to 3. The diff was tiny. People just accepted it out of hand, you know. But they were very surprised by the results. They saw they were just surprised that they were using half as much memory, and the load was finishing much faster. And we have many reports like this internally. See, one of the most outdated lies that still lingers to this day, I hear it from people I interview, it's like, well, isn't Python 2 faster than Python 3? Well, that may have been true in times of yore, where people had horse and buggies, but today, with modern code, it's not true. With normal code that people just write, it's going to be faster in Python 3, and that's what we're seeing at Facebook. Now, by 2017, we were finally in this glorious future where you could have nice things. A future of modern Python at Facebook was secure. And in Q1 of 2017, Instagram finished their migration to Python 3. It freed them up to start making use of these new technologies like async I/O and typing. Now, upgrading Python versions is no longer this dark, scary future, but it's like Christmas with every new feature release. We now focus on problems like PEP 484 typing of our code base or migrating services that use async I/O. Python at Facebook is fun again. Last year, we were able to start a project that replaced the FB Thrift Python stack that I said needed a lot of work with a new async I/O one that takes full advantage of the async C++ work that they've done. The problem that we have now is that service and library owners are asking internally, can we get rid of Python 2 support? Oh, yes, yeah, you can. But so we commonly see Python 3 only regressions now in legacy Python 2 code, like the opposite problem I used to have. And most of the time, people reply with, well, can't you just use Python 3? Why do I got to fix this? Oh, what a wonderful world in which I live. Now, I don't include 2018 in my timeline. Since that year, much of 2017, we were no longer in the trenches fighting the good fight. We had already won the hearts and minds of the engineers at Facebook. So at this point, it was really victory. We may have not have known it, but it was victory where it mattered. Removing Python 2 was only a matter of time. So what does it look like at Facebook today? We ended out Q3 of 2014 with 4 Python 3 entry points. This did not change for almost a year until Q2 of 2015 when we had a 5th entry point. Sadly, I didn't keep any statistics after that for about a year. You can see the green line. But the day after, a few days after I landed the default Python 3, my teammate Cooper put out a new automatic stats gather that looked at the build configs and counted them by Python version. So we were very surprised that we already had 4% of people. It wasn't default, they were using it, so that was cool. But on March 19th of this year, we crossed over the 50% line, meaning that we have more Python 3 running at Facebook than we have Python 2. And today, of the tens of thousands of entry points, we're close to 55% of them being Python 3. And by this time next year, we will be at 106%. Sorry, that's a bad statistics joke. So furthermore, Wukash posted this, tweeted this this year. We were traveling to the Dublin Facebook office to help a team convert to Python 3. Wukash posted, it was like basically they saw a 4x CPU improvement and a 50% memory win. And this was a service that I said will probably always be running on Python 2. It's just one of those tons of dependencies. Hey, I was wrong. So don't lose hope. Even the things that are hopeless seem to change eventually. And at Facebook now, it's actually an embarrassment to say that your project runs only on Python 2. And you ask them about it, they start to waffle. They're like, oh, well, I'm not sure. But of the tens of millions of lines of Python code at Facebook, 73% of them are Python 3. And we've already announced an internal end-of-life date for Python 2. And we'll be moving this year to make it impossible to ship new Python 2 build configs. We started out a goal with just being able to use Python 3 in production so we could have the nice things. And we ended up with so much more. So let's review. If you build it, they will come sometimes. But you have to make it a possibility, otherwise it'll never happen. Change has to start with somebody. That somebody should be you. Pick Python 3 for your next project. Get people to help you, even if they don't know you're helping you. That's the point of linters and unit tests. And find your allies and recruit them. If you're not training your new hires today, you should be training your new hires. Train them for what you want. Set up something to gather statistics, so you know what you're doing. And it added a gamification internally. People are like, oh, we have a higher percentage of Python 3 in our project. And finally, write some awesome stuff in Python 3. This will make people want to convert. Lastly, before you discount me and say that, oh, he had some special ability or he knew something or qualification drives this effort, I firmly believe that I was completely unqualified to drive this effort. My assertion is that this change doesn't require any special qualifications, only the will and perseverance to make it happen. If you believe it can happen, other people will believe it can happen too. So I got some photo credits to silence my lawyers of the various things I've used. Most of them taken from Wikimedia Commons, and some of them just ripped off and changed by me. So, questions? Anybody have time for 2 questions?
So we have time, just a couple minutes, so probably time for 1 or 2 questions for any brave souls when they approach this mic.
So I work for Ford, which is a 100-year-old plus company,
Okay.
where there's a little bit less of a culture of sort of anyone being able to contribute changes. Do you have any recommendations for how to go about navigating?
So on a traditional hierarchy where you have managers that kind of tell you what you have to do, you usually can just find a manager that you're friendly with, and you can sell them on it. And you can work with them to sell their manager on it. And usually you get high enough, it's not as much. So at Facebook, the problem was like 10 times worse. So instead of being able to convince one manager, I had to convince thousands of people to do it. And so it may be easier, it could be harder depending on how dogmatic the company is, but it's usually you pick that manager who can basically say, yes, we're gonna do this. And you can still do the things like I did. You can say, oh, we need to do these things to improve our code quality. And they're like, yeah, that sounds great. And you do these things and people slowly start fixing these issues because of the linter.
Thank you.
Time for 1 more question.
Yeah, so it seemed like your transition was really aided by having like microservices as like you're able to sort of attack this like piecemeal project by project?
Well, we don't really have a lot of microservices at Facebook. We have a lot of individual services that kind of talk to each other. I wouldn't call them microservices in that design, but our code base is this giant shared code base that anybody will link into you and grab dependencies out of you. So it's really, you kind of have to snake down your dependency tree and kind of update things, and you just do the two polyglot thing.
Yeah. I guess my question is, how would you approach this? So my scenario where you have it's a mono repo where it's all or nothing, really.
Just one giant service. I would follow the Instagram's keynote from last year about how to do a mono service, and that's how they basically converted stuff to 2 to 3. They made their unit test run in Python 3, and then when all the tests passed, they just made the switch.
All right. Cool. Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.